In Europe, before Cobra Commander was who we know him as, he was another fearsome warlord, a brutal baron with blood of iron. Let's talk about Baron Ironblood and the Red Shadows. But before we do, let me say thank you for watching JL's Comics. If you liked the video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I do upload videos like this every week. Alright, let's jump into our story. The earliest days of Baron Ironblood are shrouded in mysteries. Thought that he came from a Swiss family by the name of Cassels, whose family motto is Sanguineo Ferris, meaning our blood is iron. It's alleged that a diplomat in the Cassels family had a son named Marcus in 1928. Marcus Constantine Cassels and his father moved to England during World War II, where his father passed away in 1945. Marcus then joined the British Army's Parachute Regiment from 1948 to 1950. An incident in 1950 which led to Lieutenant Marcus Cassels being court-martialed alleged that he pushed a colleague out the window of an airplane after an argument. However, nothing could be proven and the charges were dropped. Marcus was then admitted to Trinity College in Cambridge to study natural sciences and nuclear physics. His movement after this is shrouded in mystery again. But there are anecdotal reports of a guy named Cassels who led a US platoon in the Korean War, which was called the Baron's Brigade. This Cassels was brought up on war crimes charges for abusing Korean POWs, and then he disappeared. Was this the same Cassels? No one knows. He popped up again in the late 1950s, now leading a mercenary outfit in Africa and calling himself the Baron. This Baron led his mercs in Congo insurrections and overthrowing heads of state. A French newspaper outlet identified Cassels as the agent who slaughtered a group of missionaries in Kenya in 1959. There were also reports out of Iran that a guerrilla calling himself the Bloody One was operating a unit on the Afghanistan-Soviet Union border. The Baron then parlayed his scientific knowledge into profit, fielding offers from the competing governments of both the United States and the USSR. He worked with the Soviets primarily, even playing a part in the Bay of Pigs incident, which put a battery of Soviet nuclear missiles at the US's doorstep right in Cuba. His name popped up in a Russian newspaper called Pravda, which means truth, citing the fact that he was working at the Lenin Science Institute in Kiev, but fought with Soviet authorities, quite possibly over a 1965 disaster called the Ukraine missile strike disaster. The explosion from the disaster laid waste to 100 square miles of land, and it was the same year that he fled to South America. Not long after this, an assassin working with the secret police in Uruguay named the Baron killed the president of Chile. Here, among the secret Nazi foundations for a Fourth Reich, the Baron learned of a massive cache of Nazi gold still hidden in the hills of Austria. So he killed those who told him about it, claimed the gold, and declared himself, once and for all, Baron Ironblood. He used the massive wealth he gained from the gold to fund a private army and build a compound in the Amazonian jungles of Brazil. From here, he built his army and technology, selling it out to anyone with a big enough bank account. He had Black Major as his executive officer, Red Jackal as head of the Red Shadows, Red Laser as his chief scientist, a laser tech student from Tokyo, Japan that he brainwashed and recruited out of a terrorist network. He also had Red Wolf, who became his pilot, while Skeletron, Muton, and Kraken made up the rest of his rank and file, along with his shock troops. Now with the Red Shadows network of buildings, labs, manufacturing plants, and agents in place worldwide, the Baron took to world domination while continuously running into Action Force. In Battle Issue 422, Baron Ironblood had Black Major take his shadows and invade the Island of Ascendancy. He then demanded $400 million in gold from the United Nations, or, as he threatened, he would blow up the island with a super bomb. Action Force quickly deployed Q-Force to the island, while Space Force dropped SAS on the island, and the SAS softened up the beach so that Z-Force could make landfall. And they took the island back, but the Baron escaped in a red submarine. Baron Ironblood then retreated to a hidden valley in the high Andes of South America, which is where we find him in Battle 428. As revenge for losing Ascendancy Island, the Baron attacked Action Force with his Red Shadows. Soon after, Action Force struck back, hunting the Baron in Operation Bloodhound. They wanted him badly. One dossier printout says that the Baron and his Red Shadows were directly responsible for the deaths of over 500 Action Force personnel. But the Baron poisoned his own troops and escaped to another base. Despite that, the Red Shadows, ever faithful, continued to yell, "Blood for the Baron!" in support of him. The Baron was briefly captured by Eagle during Operation Ironblood, but Black Major, along with Red Vulture, showed up to rescue him. Red Vulture, by the way, is the driver that came with the Shadow Track vehicle. A lucrative venture, but one that also sealed his fate, is when he sold rockets to North Korea, which they then used on American forces during the Vietnam War. He then conducted simultaneous terrorist operations around the globe, which prompted the United Nations to pass emergency resolution to stop him. He became enemy number one. Suddenly, Baron Ironblood was a target of countless foreign agencies. He was wanted, dead or alive, a bounty on his head. To save himself, he informed on his own operation, giving tips to intelligence agencies and even directly to Action Force, collecting bounties on his own troops in the process. Still wanted, and now also by those he betrayed, he had to shake the trail. To do so, he cast off his Ned Kelly helmet and now chose to emulate a snake, more specifically, a cobra. After a black bag op took out his red shadows in the entire compound, the Baron went to Singapore where he brought in a plastic surgeon from South Africa who designed him a faceplate. He brought in an armorer who designed him his battle helmet. He brought in a military outfitter from Macau who designed him his light blue tunic and uniform, as well as a herpetologist who taught him the ways of the snake. And with all these parts in place, Baron Ironblood transformed into Cobra Commander. Instead of paying these people, though, he killed them all. He then left Singapore and went to a snake temple in Southeast Asia to build a new base of operations around his new identity, and thus Cobra Commander and the Cobra organization were born in the ruins of Baron Ironblood and the Red Shadows. The Red Shadows survived, however, but they would be led by one of Baron Ironblood's former exos, a guy named Black Major. And from then on, and because of Ironblood's betrayal, Black Major led operations against the Baron's new outfit. In Action Force's 1987 annual, Cobra Commander sent Storm Shadow after Black Major, nearly killing him, although he escaped and went to ground. But he would show up much later on, even in Larry Hama's IDW run on A Real American Hero. This was only made possible as Palitoy and IPC ceased production of Action Force in 1985, with Hasbro and Marvel UK taking over the franchise, which was rolled into the G.I. Joe line, and the reason why Baron Ironblood became Cobra Commander. At the time of the conversion, the former Baron's other right-hand man, Red Jackal, also changed his identity. He was no longer Anton Nobokov from the port of Riva in Latvia, USSR. He was now Destro from the clan Destro. Destro became the chief weapons supplier for Cobra, using his Mars Industries for construction of things like asp guns, water moccasins, claws, to go with the older equipment like the Hyena and the Robo-Skull. Speaking of the Robo-Skull was created by Ironblood Laboratories in Mato Grosso, South America. Bob Brecken, who designed the toy for Palitoy, says that the concept behind Action Force, when they were moving away from the Action Man concept to a team-focused concept, put 4 teams of Action Force against Baron Ironblood and his cohorts. Bob says that he imagined Ironblood and his men as quote-unquote tomorrow's pirates. So he went for the skull and crossbones iconography, which also found its way into the design for the Robo-Skull. Bob also says that Palitoy was marketing Star Wars toys in the United Kingdom, and so he took the idea of the Empire's TIE Fighter and overlaid that skull symbolism to create Robo-Skull, which had gone through land vehicle concepts with wheels and tank tracks before finally landing on the flying idea. He also applied some Gothic cathedral architectural designs into the wings, so all of these influences came together to form the Skull Fighter. What? The first name for the Robo-Skull was Skull Fighter. One prototype had very large skull in the middle, large enough for the figure to stand upright in. The production design, though, scaled down the size of the skull while adding cannons to the triangle wings, which were also updated for the final production model. The first pilot for Skull Fighter was going to be Robo-Skull, fitting with the theme. What happened here, though, was when marketing got a hold of it, the pilot's name became the name of the vehicle, and the figure turned into a figure named Skeletron, who then became an exclusive mail-away figure. So then they had to make a pilot to include, and that's when Red Wolf came along. But according to concept design prints from Bob himself, the Skeletron is an android creation from Ironblood Laboratories, the same lab that built the nearly indestructible death machine called Muton. Skeletron is atomic powered, and he has an incredible power grip, the same kung fu grip technology from which Baron Ironblood acquired by blackmailing the scientist who was working on the technology. He also had a computer in his cranium and in his eyes, a quote-unquote deadly hypnotic paralyzing beam. And the Baron got the hypnotic technology by brainwashing a scientist working on ESP for the US government during the Cold War. I'd imagine this was part of the CIA's programs on this from that time period. This was all going to be on his file card before he became a no-file card mail-away figure. Another of Baron Ironblood's soldiers is a green monster named Kraken. Baron Ironblood discovered Kraken frozen in ice at the polar ice cap. The Baron took this frozen creature back to his compound, back to his laboratories, and created an army of Kraken clones. In 2005, the Devil's Due G.I. Joe series introduced a new iteration of the Red Shadows. G.I. Joe team members had been picked off and assassinated one by one throughout the storyline, and there was a lot of treachery with Cobra trying to use the Tempest device and the G.I. Joe team deploying a low-yield nuclear device over Cobra Island. Right after this is when General Joe Colton went to visit General Mars Herring in Washington, D.C., and it was revealed that a former MI5 operative named Wilder Vaughn was now leading the Red Shadows. They then murdered all of the jugglers, that secret cabal of generals at the Pentagon who influenced the Joes over the years. Vaughn's second in command, his Red Jackal basically, was a guy named Arthur Kulik, the guy with the red tattoos on his shaved head. He also had a deadly asset in the sniper from Ghana, wanted in a dozen countries, named Dila Eden. These few characters are unique to the Devil's Due continuity. Dila is the one who stabbed and killed Lady J just as she ran her and Flint off the road. The Red Shadow's ultimate plan was to completely restructure human civilization into a new technocracy led by him and Dila, and together they would make children, and their progeny would ultimately lead the New World Order after they did. The catalyst for this would be an apocalypse triggered by the Red Shadows controlled Umbra Systems company, who were the ones who made most of the military operating system arrays in dozens of countries. The story then went to the G.I. Joe America's Elite title. This is when the Baroness met up with Wilder Vaughn to trade information for an advanced prototype armor. The Baroness and Destro ended up trading the Mars company to Cobra Commander in exchange for their infant son Eugen, and this all led to World War III at the end of the volume. In 2010, the G.I. Joe Collectors Club released a comic book via Fun Publications exclusive to the G.I. Joe Con that year. It had a story about Black Major capturing Flint in order to test a chemical agent nerve gas on him so he could prove its fieldworthiness and then sell it to Cobra. In 2017, a massive event called Revolutionaries brought all of IDW's properties like Action Man, Adventure Team, Mask, G.I. Joe, Transformers, ROM Space Knight, Micronauts, and others together for a line-wide event. During that event, General Joe Colton took on the persona of Baron Ironblood. He thought he was doing good by targeting every single Transformer on Earth and not identifying them as either Autobot or Decepticon. They were all bad to him. He formed an alliance called the Iron Ring with other criminals like Iron Claw, Dr. Mindbender, Mercy Gale from Action Man as Dr. X, and Dr. X's number 2, a female Storm Shadow who used to lead the Red Shadows, who in this continuity formed from what was left of the Arashikage clan. Colton as Ironblood was also able to bribe Destro with Cybertron tech to use the mass device. He also recruited Miles Mayhem to the Iron Ring, a guy whose Project Spectrum later evolved into the Mobile Armored Strike Command. Larry Hama finally started including some of the Action Force characters in his Real American Hero run through IDW. However, because Baron Ironblood became Cobra Commander, he had to go with Black Major as the leader. In 2013, Black Major, Muton, the Red Shadows, and the Robo-Skull Craft finally showed up in A Real American Hero with issue 188. The Red Shadows had taken Dr. Adele Burkhart and others hostage aboard the Aden Explorer survey freighter off the coast of Kalingaland in East Africa. So Stalker, Gung-Ho, Torpedo, Beachhead, and Scarlet had to board the vessel from a rib. They thought it was just Abdi Ali and his terrorist cell, but they were actually being run by Black Major along with the Red Shadows. And as the team swept the top deck of the vessel, they ran right into a Red Shadows patrol, but managed to put them all down. This is when Black Major called up the robotic death machine known as Muton. Scarlet, Stalker, and Gung-Ho opened fire on full auto at the mechanical beast, but the bullets just bounced and pinged off of Muton's armored frame. Torpedo, though, managed to stick a shaped charge on Muton, which blew a hole right through the cyborg center mass. They then tossed his flaming carcass into the sea below the freighter. Pressing forward again, the G.I. Joe team continued to put down pirates and Red Shadows alike. Black Major sent all of the Red Shadows after the Joes, but they managed to set up a kill box on the top deck, taking out another Red Shadow squadron. One Red Shadow actually activated a suicide vest and charged the G.I. Joes, but Gung-Ho blooped him with a 40 Mike frag grenade, and that blast coupled with the vest blew out the rest of that Red Shadow squadron and a large chunk of the ship in the process. Another Red Shadow hit Wild Bill's Tomahawk with a Grail SA-7, a surface-to-air missile. The Red Shadows continued to attack the Joe's elevated position, but Wild Bill, despite that strike on his Tomahawk, managed to keep the helicopter steady long enough for Roadblock to empty his Madus right into them. At the nearby Whale, the ship where ops were being directed from, a monstrosity suddenly appeared in the rainy night. A massive VTOL craft strafed the Whale. It was the Robo-Skull. Using a wave for an evasive maneuver, Cutter managed to get a missile fired off at the Robo-Skull. So the freighter unit took out all the Red Shadows, but Black Major managed to escape in the Robo-Skull. Later, the team acquired technology from Revant Robotics, which, when coupled with their revived Serpentor, allowed them to control a giant mech robot, or at least that was the idea. So, as Serpentor was being reawoken for that project, Wild Bill dropped Covergirl, Dusty, Clutch, Bazooka, Outback, and Throwdown into Olistan, a little sliver of country between Prupistan and Rudatistan. This was meant as a recon mission, and from their observation point, Outback spotted a shadow track loaded with red shadows, blue ninjas from Revenge, and a sand viper from Cobra, and it was confirmation that all three of these groups were now working together. CoverGirl distracted them with her V-neck shirt, while the Joes bludgeoned the enemy on the shadow track and stole their uniform. Probably the only time you'll ever see Throwdown and Outback in Red Shadow's uniforms. But now disguised, they made entry into the base, penetrating its defenses, and in a sub-level of the base they met Black Major and Red Laser for the first time, although they didn't know that these were the Joes in disguise. But they then discovered the reason they were all working together is that the base was Black Major's assembly facility for their own giant robot that Red Laser, with his scientists, was building. After the Joes attacked the assembly area, Black Major told his troops, "I saved myself for the good of us all to ensure quality leadership in this time of peril." To which a Saw Viper replied, "That was very noble of you, Black Major." I don't know if he was being genuine there or not. The Joes had to change costumes quickly and shoot their way out to where CoverGirl and her Wolverine, along with Bazooka and Clutch and a Hummer, were waiting for them so they could all exfil. They just happened to also have Red Laser as a hostage. Black Major and his forces pursued them on his tank, and the robot was activated, and the shadow track doubled back to deal with the robot launch. Black Major didn't want his troops to shoot at the shadow track because he wanted to protect Red Laser, who was still on the shadow track. The mission went sideways when Throwdown was trapped on the robot as it launched into near-Earth orbit for touchdown at the pit where Serpentor was fighting the Joes. After the mission failure, Black Major had to answer to Cobra Commander at Silent Castle. Major was quickly ready to blame the failure on Red Laser, but then Dr. Mindbender stepped in and said it's the fault of this new Arashikage trained ninja, G.I. Joe. That was Throwdown, and it set in motion the events which have led up to Throwdown's capture during fall 2020's Snake Hunt event. A G.I. Joe named Bombstrike was dispatched to see who else Red Laser might be working with in building their robot. She found Dr. Sidney Biggles-Jones and Dr. Cassandra Knox as Red Laser's partners who had planned to install railguns on their next massive robot. Later, Bombstrike managed to get the drop on Knox and Black Major, but Dr. Biggles-Jones shot her in the head and the Red Shadows dragged Bombstrike's body outside. It turns out that it was a low-velocity bullet which bounced off her skull at a weird angle, so it missed her brain and didn't kill her. Outside, she was stirred awake by some locals, and she shot and killed the Red Shadows, and the Cobra Stinger commandeered the vehicle with aid from her new friends. She unloaded the Stinger for local currency and went to ground, and with help from a local named Layla, made her way for the border. One local reported on them, and so at the banks of the river, a massive Robo-Skull appeared, flown by Black Major himself. Bombstrike took out Black Major's Robo-Skull with a shoulder-launched RPG, and the Robo-Skull crashed right into the river. She then proceeded to beat the crap out of Black Major and got away with Layla and her dirt bike. Bombstrike then took out another group of blue ninjas and Red Shadows when another Muton made an appearance. Layla was able to use a blue ninja lightsaber to cut Muton in half. Torpedo, Tunnel Rat, and Alpine were deployed to track down Bombstrike and help her evac. They came across her neat work at the border in the wreckage of the Robo-Skull. They then ran into the Black Major and his forces, rolling through the desert with a Hiss 4, a Hiss 1, and a ringneck. Bombstrike had been captured and strapped to the front of the Hiss tank, so the team, using speed, maneuverability, and lethal accuracy, plus a last-minute assist from Layla and her dirt bike, were able to take them out and rescue Bombstrike. And Black Major popped up again later at a Revenge facility in Darklonia, where he was now working with Dr. Venom and presumably Darklon on building an army of upgraded battle android troopers. In issue 249, a Techno Viper actually called Black Major the Iron Major. The Viper may have mixed up his name with Baron Ironblood, or he may be a fan of the Iron Major, a DC Comics character who was a villain to Sergeant Rock. But either way, that's the last time we've seen them all. Where will they show up next? Who knows? But when they do, I'll be sure to talk about them. Until then, that's a wrap on this one, my friends. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll be one of the first to know when I upload videos just like this each and every week. I'm Jesse, this is J. Ellis Comics, and I'll see you soon.